Let's turn this. Into this. So although this sample sounds quite complicated, it's actually pretty simple, and I've limited myself to only around about 10 sounds in total for the whole sample. I've used a lot of atmospheres and textures, and we'll get into that, but the first thing I did was play out this simple progression on my nylon string acoustic guitar. The chords that I played were in E minor, and I started with an A minor chord, adding the 9 on top, the B note. I moved to the E minor, then to the C major 7th, and then I played a diminished passing chord that will bring the cycle back around to the A minor again. And I just repeated that. Now the guitar sounded nice on its own, but I knew that there was some processing in my head that I wanted to put onto the guitar, and I also wanted to add a couple of synths around it. Keep that guitar as the main focal point, the main actor in the movie, but just bring some other sounds up as supporting actors to help give it some weight and some more presence. I played a couple of notes in the E minor pentatonic scale again on the guitar. I knew I was going to reverse these, and I just did a couple of little noodles that I was going to throw in and out throughout the sample to add some interest and some ear candy. So I recorded the guitar around 127 BPM, and then I stretched it to 140, which immediately introduced a couple of lo-fi artifacts, because whenever you time stretch something, it slightly changes how it feels and how it sounds. You'll also notice that the sample in the preview was in D minor, and I achieved that by just dropping the whole sample by 2 semitones using sound shifter on the master, which I often do, and a lot of top sample makers do that as well. And again, it just adds more lo-fi artifacts to the sound and gives it that vintage kind of flavor. So on the guitar, I put a channel EQ. I went for one of my favorite plugins for vintage texture, which is the RevSpring 636 by Arturia. A shaper box where I just introduced a little bit of side chaining in and out of the sound to give it a bit of pumping and breathing. Microshift chorus on style 2, which emulates the H3000, I believe, and then some phaser. You'll see me use Logic stock phaser a lot, and stock plugins are great, don't overlook them. All DAWs are essentially the same, they do the same thing. You've got to use what you're comfortable with, just stick with it and learn it to the best of your ability. On the reverse guitars, I added a shaper box because I wanted to just pan this from left to right. Some Portal on the Penta minor in 5 setting, and then again the Logic phaser, because I did leave quite a lot of space in the guitar, so I knew that the bass would be able to be quite busy. I went for the Scarby Rickenbacker bass. I do have a real bass, and it's over there, but honestly these days I do hardly pull it out. This is the setting I used. I put no processing on it at all, but I kept the velocities quite natural and played this in on my MIDI keyboard. Little fills, I just find that this bass cuts through on laptop speakers, on phone speakers as well. It's not too low that if a producer were to take this sample, they could add 808s or other things underneath it. I always provide bass midis in my samples as well, which gives you real help if you're looking to add 808s or any sub bass. For the main keys on this track, again, I went for the Sky keys on the Crackle reverse piano setting. I just played some very sparse chords and voiced out in a way that didn't clash with the guitar. I kept the keys in quite a high register for this one because I knew that that mid-range was going to be taken up by the guitar. You can see the MIDI I played in here. Added an EQ just to give it a little bit of shape to the sound, and a little bit of RC20 where all I'm doing is a bit of wobble and a little bit of distortion. I didn't really want to mess with it too much. I added a piano in where I saw the keyboard as more of a high register, just playing chords and then releasing. I saw the piano playing more melodic line and dropping in and out. And for this piano, I went for LA Custom Mellow setting here. Processing wise, I used the multi-band compressor to roll off some low mid sounds, some RC20 on a similar setting as the keyboard, some ozone width there, Valhalla Vintage, just a little bit of reverb, and really EQ'd this in, gave it more of a filtered telephone EQ type sound. And honestly, this was giving me such a good feeling. I knew then that I wanted to add some textures and some ear candies, and for this I do make them myself quite often, but a goated producer friend of mine called Louis, who's released some incredible kits, was so kind as to bless me with his latest kit. It's not been released yet. I actually took one of his sounds, the soundscape sound, and I just looped it for the first 17 bars of the sample, and I used this as a bed. So when you hear this just with the drums and the acoustic guitar, it just sounds so ethereal and ambient. I added in one or two other Louis sounds, we'll get to them from bar 17. I programmed a very simple percussion groove. I used that Arturia Rev reverb again, and I just pushed and nudged a couple of the sounds to be slightly off grid. The sounds here I took from Monty Booker's kit, and I put a kick on every first beat of the bar. From bar 17, took out a couple of sounds, took out that soundscape. I used a couple of these little ear candies from Louis, and I pitched the key of the sample, some variation on the piano, some of the voicings on my main keyboard. And as I told you before, I never like samples that just sound like they go all the way through from like bar 1 to say bar 30, whatever, and just sound like loop parts. I always keep variation, even if it's just subtle variation. So the last thing that I added was a little bit of vocal sprinkles, and I sung them into my phone, again using my voice notes app. And I find that I'm actually using my voice notes app more than even my mic. I've got a couple of mics, some vintage ribbons, and also a Neumann back there somewhere, but honestly, I'm just using my phone. I used some auto tune, which was desperately needed, decapitator for a little bit of distortion, some vintage verb, a filter because I wanted some envelope modulation. I thought this added some nice movement to the vocal, and then I EQ'd it, and I really added these vocals mainly in the second half of the sample just to add something fresh for the ear. Guys, if you're getting something out of this, go follow me on Instagram. My handle is here, and cop some of my free mini kits. I'm gonna have a lot more kits coming out soon. So on my master channel, I did something interesting. I added a shaper box just to the mid-range from 194 Hertz to 3.81 kilohertz. Added a little side chain going on every half a bar, just to give the whole sample a bit of breathing. A tape plug-in, I like how it looks. I don't know if it really adds much, but you know, it looks nice. Some L2 to catch some peaks and give myself some volume. And then one of my favorite plugins here, AB Metric. Put in some of my favorite samples, and I can compare and A/B them against mine to make sure that I'm in a similar kind of ballpark. So as you can see, the key is simplicity here. A couple of sounds can sound bigger than 5 million sounds. So if you've got something out of this and you want to know a little bit more about the chords of Brent Faiyaz and R&B, click here.